Sometimes the story we tell ourselves is not really true. Sometimes the story others tell about us is not really true. Here on today's Heart Lift with Janelle, we are going to learn how to rewrite our story. So pick up your favorite pen and journal, grab a cup of something delicious, and start your heart-lifting journey towards living a meaningful life.
Welcome to today's Heart Lift with Janelle. I'm already blushing and turning red. I feel hot inside because today we have with us not only one of my hero writers, Gary Thomas. Oh my gosh, I can't even believe I'm saying that because I devoured his writing for years and years when I wanted to be a writer. Now I am a published author, thank you. But I studied his writing, particularly his book, Sacred Pathways. It came in a time in my life when I needed to know that there were many different ways, 9 particularly is what he deals with, pathways to God. And I applaud him for writing that book back in the day. You said 1996, Gary, when the contemplative practices were even less open to our evangelical world. But today, Gary, welcome. First, welcome. Thank you for honoring us.
I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
Just can't even believe you're sitting there. And so today, Gary is coming to talk to us. Okay, are you ready? I think it deserves a drum roll. This is going to be very new for my audience, although we will be approaching subjects that need to be talked about because in my private practice, I absolutely talk freely and openly. Sometimes I sit there and go, how did I get here? How did I suddenly become a sex therapist? But I am. And so I wanted to bring Gary in his new book, Married Sex, a Christian couple's guide to reimagining, and I love that word, your love life. Co-authored with Deborah, and correct me if I'm wrong, Fileta?
Perfect. You got it the first time. Fileta.
Okay.
Yes.
Awesome. And she's a licensed professional counselor, and Gary is just I'm like, you've been it all. I mean, you're author, you've been pastor, you've been so many things. And so you bring to us a breadth and depth of experience of working with couples and working with folks. And Gary, I didn't mention this before, but my journey and understanding and probably coming to where I am today, as far as the work I do with couples in the realm of sex therapy or sex, figuring life out. And I did a women's conference at a college, an intervarsity conference, and there were over 400 young women at this conference. And it was after my first book. But when it was all over, there was just a line of young women waiting, a line. And they waited. They waited a long, long time. Some even went and sat in a corner and said, I'm not leaving until I can talk to her. And they just were weeping and weeping and weeping. These are young, beautiful, collegiate Christian young women. And they said, I had oral sex. I never thought I would do that. Why did I do that? Why did I do that? And I can remember I had young teenage girls and a son at that time. I'm getting hot talking about it. And I'm just trying to have okay, sweetie, just talk to me. Go ahead, talk to me. And that was like my introduction to going, there is something horribly wrong with the way we are handling this, not only myself as a parent of teens at that time, but how we're handling the subject matter of sex and intimacy and sex in the church. So, Gary, first and foremost, why did you partner with Deborah to write the book, co-author the book? I'm curious.
Can I go back to what you just said? And then I'm eager to answer that question because I think what you said is really significant, Janelle, and profound, and to go forward. When I look at the New Testament and when Paul talks at 1 Thessalonians 4 against sexual immorality, he has this key phrase, and that no one would sin against their brother or sister in this way.
Oh.
Paul talked about sexual purity as don't hurt other people.
Right.
We defined it as you will be ruined if you do this.
That is
not
absolutely
what the Bible
truth.
says. That doesn't fit with God's grace. It doesn't fit with God's redemption. It doesn't fit with God's healing. It's that Paul was saying, look, I don't want the community torn apart by people sexually hurting each other. It's an entirely different focus. And often women who may have been coerced into that then feel ruined instead of sinned against.
I sure did.
The problem is in God's view, they were victimized. They
Very
weren't
much so.
ruined. And so I just don't want to go over that because it
I don't
breaks
want you
my
to.
heart to hear stories like that. So
well, it was heartbreaking. It was heart-wrenching. And I literally, it was one after the other.
Yeah, I know.
And then when I got home, because I had shared my testimony, a very similar one, and I was sitting at my table at that time. I was a writing teacher for junior high and high school students. I was grading papers. I was pretty exhausted from the conference, obviously. But my phone rang because I gave 400 and some girls my phone number. I don't know what I was thinking at the time. I was just I have to help you. And so a girl called and she was like, is this Janelle? I'm like, yes, it is. And she's weeping. And she's like, I'm in your tight spot. I'm in the same place. I think I'm pregnant. He's on his way over. It was one time. I didn't want to do it. Why did I do it? I had pledged myself to purity. I don't know why I did it. I'm like, okay, girl. All right, here's your moment. Here's your moment. She said, he's here. Can I call you back? And I'm like, I'm not moving. I'm praying. I'm here for you. I'm holding. I didn't say holding space then because it's not what we said back then, but I did. And she called back. She said, well, I'm not pregnant. I said, okay. So then here you go. Here you go. So it really wrecked me. But at the time I did start writing a book about it, but then I got nervous and I thought if I broach this subject, I'm not sure I'll be received very well. Yeah. I chickened out at that time.
See, and this is part of why I was eager to talk with you. I'm honored that you would have me because I know you've worked with real people and real people. And with this issue, sometimes it's the issue that's used where people are just talking about it theoretically. And when you've looked in the eyes of couples and really want to help, it's just different. And it's one of the reasons I wanted to work with Deborah. So I'll finally go back to answering the question. A number of national marriage ministry leaders, will have text messages or email threads. I don't remember which one it was, but one of them were just asking, what's the next book that we could read for evangelical couples on sex? And the issues they were facing, there's some very good ones out there, is that a lot of the ones that were used in the past were getting a bit dated.
Right.
One of the more popular ones just had very male-centric kind of locker room language that the guys would relate to, and the wives would say, how come you're making us read this? And they said, Gary, we think you're the person that can do this. You've written Sacred Marriage and these others. But I didn't think the time was right, Janelle, for a white man to tell Christian wives.
Gary. Right.
So I was praying about it, and I've long admired the works of Deborah Fileta, full-blooded Egyptian, younger woman, married 15 years. A licensed counselor.
She's amazing.
And I loved her books. And I thought, well, this is perfect because I as one who'd been married 35 years at the time, I can talk to older couples and older issues. Deborah and Jonathan had been married just under 15 years when we started this. And so they could talk to younger couples. She can give the wife's perspective. I can give the husband's perspective. She can give the counselor's perspective.
Yeah.
I can put in some of the theology and the pastoral perspective. And it just really, for me, it was a match made in heaven. I thought Deborah did a brilliant job on her chapters. I was glad that she was able to write some of the things that I didn't have to write. Your body is a wonderland. When she said she'd take that chapter, I'm like, yes. Thank you very much. And she helped me refine my own words. Well, this is how wives will receive it. This is how wives will do that. We knew that writing a book at this day and age, 2022 on sex, it came out in 2021, that there would be a lot of pushback for a variety of reasons. And so it was just really going into it together. How do we stay true to scripture, but how do we be courageous, and how do we write a book that's helpful?
For the times,
and it was really,
and yet evergreen as well. Right.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And it was really I think there are 5 blocks to bedroom intimacy. I don't know if you can go there.
Go there. This is fantastic.
In another podcast yet, but this is really, and this is where we wanted the book.
I want to take notes, but okay.
The first block is really theological repression. People think that God isn't pro-sex, or he's so into no sex that you shouldn't do it. And so we start off with the Song of Songs. And also we make the case, Song of Songs 1-2 begins with the wife saying, your love is better than wine.
I have this down in my notes. When I read it, I was like, number 1, I didn't drink wine. I was a teetotaler because I was raised with an alcoholic. And then I drank my way through 3 years of college before I became a Christian, my senior year at that school that I spoke at. And it was the thought that I was pregnant that led me to Christ for sure, and scared me half to death. But anyway, then I came out as a teetotaler, and then I started going to a Protestant church where they drink wine. And I was like, okay, so I thought, now you're broaching 2 subjects to me that can be a bit full of tension. So talk to me. I think this is amazing.
The reason that's important is this. Go back 3,000 years.
Yes.
And think about how many pleasures a woman living in the desert didn't have. A lot of responsibilities, they didn't wake up to a caramel macchiato or
green matcha.
They didn't even have Folgers, right? They had nothing. They didn't have dark chocolate in the afternoon.
Oh, what a pity.
Imagine my wife's life without dark chocolate. There was no air conditioning. There was no, in the evening, Real Housewives of Jerusalem to chill out. I mean, really, there was one pleasure a woman had, and that was wine. And so a woman here is saying to what people would have read 3,000 years ago, the one real pleasure women could claim that men would allow them to have, she's saying it's not as good as making love to my husband. When she says your love is better than wine, in Hebrew, that's Dod, D-O-D. It refers to physical love. It's not romantic love. It's not Hallmark movie love. It's what happens after the Hallmark movie ends. So if
you go over the lifetime.
Yeah. So it's all about the theological understanding is that God says sex is for the woman too, not just for the man. God celebrates Song of Songs. Just the title alone elevates the sexual experience in God's eyes. Yes. I was shocked going through the Song of Songs again, how practical it is, how explicit and helpful it is. So that's the first block, is getting over the theological thing. God doesn't have a promise. He celebrates sex, and he points us toward sex. It will free up a lot of men to know that a man simmers for his wife. Therapists,
what a great word. It's so good.
Sexual simmering, which is a big thing now.
Sexual simmering. Why do I not know that?
They're modeled by a husband and a wife 3,000 years ago in the Song of Songs. The husband is just thinking about his wife. The wife is thinking about her husband. And guys are so worried about lusting, which, look, lusting after a woman, huge problem.
Yes.
Meditating on the sexually desirable parts of your wife, biblically prescribed to get yourself in the mood. And it's freed me up, Janelle, because I'm at a stage, just so
you're going to release my husband into just lavish wildness. This is awesome. Sorry. This is great.
But I'm going to say, where Lisa and I, people talk about different libidos. Ours has been fairly well matched throughout our marriage. It hasn't been a power struggle or whatnot. And sometimes I'm a morning person to a fault. I usually wake up the first numbers of 4. I just can't sleep later. And so I get tired really early. And there's been a couple nights where we're putting it off. And my wife finally came into my office one time and says, okay, Gary, we're having sex tonight at 9:30 and it's not an option. So get yourself ready. And I appreciated it, Janelle.
Oh, Lisa, so many women would be like,
But I know it's different for a husband to hear that. I
it is that very different. Yes.
100% different. But what she was telling me is don't lay down and watch television at 8:45. So you're going to be too tired at 9:30. Get it in your baby. And so simmering, okay, Gary, your wife wants you. You need to be there.
Start simmering.
It's a biblical practice. And so I got that from the Bible. So theological
oppression, you said oppression. Repression. Okay, I like that.
Misunderstanding. I probably, some of this is off the top of my head. I could be
I love it
better, but
I love it.
But theological
Misunderstanding for sure.
Thank you.
No freedom. It's not, right. It's too much. It's like Rebecca and Isaac laughing and, playing. It's like, what? They didn't really do that. Yeah. Okay.
The second one's right up your alley that you can speak to better than I can. And that's psychological barriers. If there's trauma in the background, if there's betrayal in the background, you can't tell a woman who's been betrayed by her husband, you need to sleep with him so that he doesn't sin again when she hasn't dealt with the trauma. I mean, that itself is abuse. So
Gary, please everyone just take a pause and lean in there. Cause
she's been betrayed by this man and now you're telling her to sleep with him when she hasn't dealt with that. And that's just, it's horrific to suggest.
Might start crying.
And I think in the past, writers and speakers like me have been more concerned about helping men not fall than recognizing the depths of betrayal. And my eyes were open when I talked to counselors that would say, Gary, I'm not minimizing it, but about 35% of wives who find out their husbands are looking at porn have legitimate PTSD. They're going to have to deal with that.
That seems low to me.
Well,
with my work anyway, it's like the way that's given a slap on the hand, and I am pretty fierce with it. So I let clients know right from the get go. I'm not going to be like, no, because it's debilitating to a female. Yeah. Yep.
So
thank you for bringing that up.
Theologically free, psychologically free. And then this is, and Deborah could help with psychological, and then she really helped with relational blocks.
Yes.
There are a lot of issues in marriage that aren't sexual issues. They're relational issues. Yeah. If there is control, if there's manipulation, if there's bitterness, if there's a lack of forgiveness, anger is a big thing,
rage,
a real problem. Those are relational issues. And Deborah has a chapter. Is this a relational issue or a sexual issue? And again, as a counselor,
I'm so happy about that. Yes.
She can help people deal with that. Because again, sex is best done as a healthy expression of your relationship. And sometimes you got to fix the relationship before you can get to sex.
Oh my gosh. Say it again, please. Please. Oh my gosh.
Well, you do. I mean, you need a strong relationship. Great sex can't sustain a relationship, but a great relationship often leads to great sex.
And better. And
the reality
is, the freer you get. Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
Well, I go on too much. This is a problem.
No, this is so good.
So we've got the theological issues, the psychological issue, the relational issues, and here are the two. The physical issues.
Yes.
Sex is a physical act.
It is.
Like playing tennis, like playing golf or ballet or something, where there's certain things you have to do. And Deborah was amazed at how so many couples, not just the guy, but even the woman wouldn't even know the name of the female sexual organ or necessarily where it was.
Oh my goodness.
What to deal with. And it shocked me when she was telling me about some of what she deals with. Now, look, she's out in Pennsylvania.
Okay, she's close to me. That's right.
Her church, get this, her church is in Intercourse, Pennsylvania.
No!
So
my kids when they were young. And they were like, Intercourse, Pennsylvania. We're like, oh, what an interest. Yes. And I'm just praying to God that they were like, what's intercourse? They were young.
So it's actually, maybe I've got that wrong. It's in the Lancaster area. Maybe it's not
Lancaster.
Actually in Intercourse, but it's in that area.
Yeah. That's so funny.
But they're just physical things that men need to know, that women need to know, the men need to know about a woman's body. And one of the things I got into with that was just some of the brain science, helping guys understand, hey, did you know a woman's skin is up to 10 times more sensitive than a man's? Which just explains a lot of issues. It's why women might feel like a husband's touch is too forceful. Yes. And a husband might feel like a woman's touch is too light.
That's
why
correct. Women
tend to like foreplay more. It often feels better. These are all stereotypes. And we stress.
I'm like, rub my arm. Go ahead.
You can do great damage if you treat your husband like most husbands like to be treated. If that's not how your husband likes to be treated, you say to husbands, don't treat your wife like most wives like to be treated. That's not how she likes to be treated. But it's helpful to know basic differences between men and women for things like that. That initial sexual arousal for men tends to be far more in the limbic portion of the brain. It's why we're more geared towards sight
Yes.
Even smell, things like that. For women, when you talk about sexual arousal, it's often from the neocortex. It's the quality of the relationship.
Oh, for sure.
Intimacy. Has been kind. If he said encouraging
thoughtful
words, he's a good father.
He unloads the dishwasher.
Yeah. But guys, again, it's helpful for guys. Guys think, even if I'm frustrated with the relationship, my wife walks in a beautiful piece of lingerie. I'm good to go.
Oh, so easy. Right.
But guys, if your wife is frustrated with you and you walk into the bedroom with a leopard skin thong, don't expect that to turn things around. I can see your face. I mean, people deny that.
It's hysterical.
Men and women.
Because it's so true. You're like, dude, that is not going to help.
But we've been so ridiculed just by suggesting there's a difference between men and women. It's why it's perilous to talk about it. So we got the 4 things. Let me go to the 5th. So we've got the theological.
You're really good at keeping on track. I'm so happy you are.
The psychological blocks, the relational blocks, the physical blocks. And the 5th one, and this might be true for a lot of your listeners, just the creative blocks. You could call them the boredom blocks.
Yes.
They've been married for a long time, having sex for 10, 15, 20 years.
Yes.
And I feel like, it's nothing new. So what we were able to do, we polled or interviewed over 1,000 couples.
Oh, fantastic.
And we just gleaned so many anecdotes and stories, because it wouldn't be appropriate for small groups to meet and one husband or wife to say, you wouldn't believe what we did on Friday night. Man, my wife, it was just, we don't need to know that. But in an anonymous way, changing the names, changing the names. Our lawyers made us change every name. The stories are all true. None of the names are, except for mine and Deborah's. Even though people gave us permission, the lawyer said, no, not going to do that. So
no, not anymore. Something's going on there. I know I had to have
it just gives a lot of creative ideas where couples said, boy, this was really helpful for us. We could share it. Now, I do want to tell your listeners, Janelle, that because of those stories, this book became more explicit than I thought it would.
Yes, it is.
I'm
but
recounting
it's
what couples do. I don't believe it's pornographic.
No,
read porn. So but
I wouldn't know either. Right.
But we don't. It's not salacious where you're describing it like I imagine you would see in those kind of novels. But it does kind of set up. This is what a wife did. This is what a husband. Some of them are really sweet. There's a wife who we talk about the power of the sense of smell and memory being connected, and she puts on the same perfume that she wore on her wedding night on every anniversary.
I did it this past weekend. I'm going to let you know. My husband was like, "What am I smelling?" I'm like, "You know exactly what you're smelling."
Yeah.
It's so fun. It was like, and if I spray it and he doesn't, I'm like, "Hello, wake up, the senses." Yeah. I love
the
that.
power of sound to simmer. Yes. One wife shared how she has a number of songs. Her and her husband like to listen to music while they make love. And there's a number of songs that she has literally climaxed to.
Yep.
And if she knows, okay, tonight's the night, we're going to have sex. She's still a mom. She's getting the kids. So while she's heating up macaroni and cheese, she's playing these songs.
Yes. Good girl.
The kids have no idea that she's heating up herself as well as the macaroni and cheese. So, I mean, these are just practical.
That's so fun, though. That's such a hidden, you talk about a hidden language, the little hidden language, the looks across the room, all of those kind of things. That to me is what I try to bring to the couples as far as that's really what you're after. Is that connection.
Some get more explicit. Some people say, you tell the story of the one, Choose Your Own Adventure. We talk about how different positions.
Yeah, I haven't read that front to back.
Have a whole different climate, because sometimes was what I love about married sex. I'm speaking about the act, not the book. Sometimes it's fun. Sometimes it's intense. Sometimes it's sensual. Sometimes it's athletic. Sometimes it's just, just quickies. There's so many different kinds. But we just talk about how different positions speak something different into the relationship. It's good to laugh. Sometimes it's good to get lost in each other's eyes. Sometimes it's good just to pleasure each other. And so it opens up with the story of a wife who comes in and drops her towel and sits down between her husband's leg with her back against his chest. And they ended up, that's where they had foreplay. It's where they ended up having sex. And the story is the husband is saying it happened by accident, but it felt so
natural and different.
He said, I've been making love to this woman. I forget that couple, 15 years or something like that. He goes, and it was an accident. He goes, but why don't we think about that now and then?
Well, pray for that.
Have to be an accident. We can choose. Yeah.
And pray for that. Like I'm like, I do a lot of intention work, a lot of affirmation work, a lot of speaking healing words into the atmosphere, and I know a lot of people, okay, manifestation, all that, but it's in the scripture. Christ manifests his glory through our intimacy, Okay. I have to tell you, you have to talk about Engedi sex. Okay. I'm sorry. Okay. I have my book open to it because I just didn't want to forget, because this story on page 133 of Married Sex, I was going to read it, but I want you to this is so good. You can read it or tell it. I don't care. But I thought, wait a minute. When I was looking, I thought, is it Jedi? Is it Jedi sex? I was like, is it Jedi? And I was, oh no, it isn't. No.
Yeah, it's spelled with a G. I could see how you get the Jedi. Yeah, that makes sense. People don't know what you're talking about. Well, here's where it came from. I've written a lot about the challenges and difficulties of marriage, sacred marriage.
Yes, one of the best books ever.
To make us holy more than to make us happy. I've been very open and honest that marriage isn't always easy. I don't think any marriage is completely easy. Every marriage has its challenge. But there's this Engedi. Engedi is an oasis. In the desert, the Bible speaks of in the Song of Songs, and an oasis makes living in a desert possible. Yeah. It doesn't take you out of the desert. You go to the oasis and then you got to travel back to the desert. But those little oasis stops, you get refreshed, you get renewed, you get nourished. And I kind of think sex is like that Engedi experience, an oasis in the midst of a desert.
I love this imagery. I love it.
I open up with the story. Lisa and I lived in a very small rented home. It's actually where I wrote Sacred Marriage in our bedroom. We didn't have room enough for an office. We had 3 kids. And it's
been a while since I've read it.
Be quiet because I didn't want to wake up Lisa with my computer back then. But we had small kids, and there was one night where we were just going to a hotel it was a sex date, basically.
This is the best.
And I just remember as a young man, I was just so excited. I didn't want to be and nobody knew I'm driving. I'm going to get to be with my wife, and we don't have to worry about sounds. Nobody's going to knock on the door at exactly the wrong moment. My wife doesn't have to worry about muffling her voice. I don't have to worry about.
No, you didn't say it that way. Let me write the way you said it. Let's see. But none of that mattered in the moment. It was intense. I was going to have sex with my wife in a hotel. We wouldn't have to be quiet. Lisa wouldn't have to bite a pillow. That's fantastic.
Yes. Yeah, there we go.
And
so
great.
So we were driving there, and I mentioned in there, I don't remember what happened in that room. And if I did, I wouldn't tell people. Deborah and I really don't share much at all. That's why we interviewed so many couples. We don't share much at all about our own. But what I remember 2 things. I remember the anticipation. We didn't have much money at all. I was frustrated as a writer. We talked about this before we got on, Janelle, that my first 3 books were just, they couldn't buy us a new car today.
Amazing.
But this was an Engedi experience where we could just enjoy each other. The second thing I remember, and I tell this in a different context, when we had to really work to have sex on a cruise ship. When the kids were young, and our 2 daughters stayed in the cabin with us.
Oh boy, yes.
And the cruise lines give your kids key cards, right? So you can't lock them out. And they're sleeping in the room with us, and they were just a little too old for us to pretend that they would just sleep through or maybe not figure it out. Yes. And so we'd gone the whole week of this romantic vacation, right? You take off and the sun is setting in Miami. They're playing reggae music. Everybody's in beach clothes. It's just, you want to be romantic one time. So it's the last full day of the cruise. And we wanted to act like a married couple at least one time. And so my wife, who is a very healthy eater, wouldn't normally do this, but there was one restaurant called Johnny Rockets that had a line.
Johnny Rockets, man. Good.
Hamburgers, hot dogs,
milkshakes.
And so we got in line and I said, now kids, your mother and father have an errand to run.
Oh, this is so classic. This is so classic. We've done this so many times.
And I said, I just want to make it clear, you will not leave this line until we're back. Yeah, and they, okay. I said, now, if you get to the front of the line, I want you to go ahead and sit down and order, because if you go up that staircase to find us, we might be coming up the other staircase.
Oh,
aren't
brilliant.
we all really hungry?
So
just want to make sure. I said, okay. I thought for a second, I said, now, if you finish your meal,
you covered all the bases.
You can get a root beer float. You can get a Vanessa. I said, I will buy you this boat. And you just promised me you were going to stay here. And it's the same thing, Janelle, where I don't remember what happened. And if I did, I wouldn't say it. But here's what I remember that night at the dinner they have on the cruise ships, the smiles that Lisa and I shared.
Yeah.
Now we're happy to be with our kids because they're not keeping us apart. We're both satisfied, happy to be. But we look at each other like nobody knows.
Nobody.
You know, it's that sweet.
It's so
marital intimacy.
Yeah.
The privacy. The
so
sacredness,
sweet.
the pleasure.
Sacredness.
We had a great time.
Mm-hmm.
We figured it out.
Yes.
It was like accomplishment. and that's what I think we want to create with this book. We just want to create those smiles between husbands and wives to anticipate as an oasis and then to remember and what that does, where even, and this might sound scandalous to some, but a couple sitting in church on Sunday, and I say this one who preaches a lot of Sundays, can you believe what we did Saturday night or Friday night? Even a slow Sunday. Those are wonderful, private, sacred marital moments that pleases God, that draws a couple together, that fortifies their household. It renews their affection for each other.
You got time out.
Yeah.
Time out, Gary, because two things. Pleasing God was the massive hurdle I had to get over, like you talked about in the beginning. Okay. Giving yourself the permission to have the freedom to live out Song of Songs. Yes. And then second, it fortifies the home. And that's where I pound the table. Yes. Okay. Because I remember, I think it was before we started recording, you talked about Chuck Swindoll, but I remember him. And for those of you who don't know, Pastor Chuck, you can look him up. But he used to say, whatever happens in the boardroom happens in the bedroom. Whatever happens in the bedroom shows up in the boardroom. I will never forget hearing him say that when I was a new bride, some 35, we're married 37, so 36 years ago. And I remember listening to him at 10:30 on the radio. And he said, whatever happens in the bedroom shows up in the boardroom. And I was doing some staff work at the church. And I thought, what did he just say? That's scandalous. Like back in the day, I was like, wow. So I just want to reiterate that it is something, what you're bringing to the table, Gary, and I love sacred marriage so much, but this is even more practical in a sense, kind of sacred marriage is fundamental and principled. Like we need to be concentrated on holy and then happy, and that's something that I've experienced. And I experienced early on that if I make that sexual intimacy a priority in my marriage with my husband, he will actually hear me better. We'll actually communicate better. And I can't stress that enough, that it just makes everything better. It's the Holy of Holies. It is that sacred ground. It is that place. Well, I can't let you go. I have a whole page that we have not even gotten to, but that is just fine, Mr. Gary Thomas. I did want you to share the story of Jocelyn. You don't have to, but I think that this is I want to give women, if you remember Jocelyn, she walks into a Bible study. It's right in the beginning of the book. I can give you, I don't.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Because I was at a retreat, a women's retreat one year. Someone was going through the alphabet of what makes a good marriage. And they got to the S, and it was a huge, and I said, sex, and more sex. And everyone went, oh. And I went, I just said that out loud. And I was not free back like I am today. Yeah. I don't even know. But every woman afterwards was like, will you talk more about this? I'm like, oh, no. Okay, so Jocelyn.
Jocelyn and Danny, really sweet couple. And she hadn't been married that long. And she became a Christian, and she was going to her first women's Bible study. Okay, that's important. First
very important.
Women's Bible study. And they were talking, and she just became alarmed because she just heard these wives really ragging on their husbands. And then one of them said, and the worst is that when I come into the bedroom at night and I'm wearing a robe and I got a novel in my hands, and he thinks I might be interested in sex. And she said, honey, this robe is your message. The store is closed. And she just spoke up spontaneously and said, Danny and I have a strict no clothes in bed policy. We sleep naked. Everybody stopped. Like she just said something.
I would give anything in the world to have been in that circle.
And then she said, and sex is always on the table. And she went and just said, look, I get a better night of sleep. It makes him feel so close to me. I enjoy it. Maybe you have to work at it to make it feel better.
Yeah.
But she goes, why would you not want to do that? She goes, look, I will put on a robe to make breakfast for my kids. Mm-hmm. I never put on a robe to tell my husband, don't even think
Shops
about
closed.
It. So she got a call the next morning from the leader. Just you have so much to say, and we're just thinking maybe you should start your own Bible study. Basically, don't come back.
Unbelievable.
Positively about sex. And I know some people say, well, she is not a contentious woman at all. She's not the kind that's going to be
divisive.
Saying it, and I'm not. She's got a really sweet spirit.
Sure.
And so, yeah. But it was a big message for her. And my whole point in the book, as I started out, when you go into the Song of Songs, when the woman says, I have no greater desire, higher joy in life than making love to my husband. Then I said, Jocelyn, is the one who's acting like a biblical woman there and
she
trying
really
to tell
is.
other women,
yeah,
this can be really good. And I think their marriage shows it. Just when I've spent some time with them and whatnot. Now, let me say, Janelle, that's been one of the talks in this book. I describe them sleeping naked. People don't need to know this, but Lisa and I don't sleep naked.
No.
We just never have. But people act like I'm telling them because of this couple. I'm telling couples they have to sleep.
Oh, we're
naked.
not saying any formula. There's never a formula.
If you don't want to sleep naked, don't sleep. If you want
sleep naked.
If you want to sleep with a hoodie, sleep with a. I mean, I wouldn't even think to tell. But the point is, this book is filled with questions more than answers. It's filled with testimonies more than prescriptions. This is what this couple found is helpful. This is what this couple. And maybe you could ask, what might this do for you? Stressing, and this is so important in your field, stressing that the heart of intimacy is safety.
Thank you. Oh,
if your spouse feels betrayed or threatened, sex isn't the issue. Okay, then you got to deal with safety and betrayal. Trust
and security.
And security are essential. And Jocelyn talks about this, the ability to let go, for her to climax.
To feel,
she had to learn to let go. Well, you don't want to tell a woman in an abusive marriage to let go. That's
she doesn't feel safe.
And she shouldn't, and she can't. So you've got to deal with the security issues, and certainly not talking about abusive issues before you can get.
No, we're not. No. And I think if and when we can get Deborah, when she has some open space, because I know that she's got some serious projects that she's working on. Gratefully, I'm so grateful to hear more from Deborah. But secure attachment theory plays a very big part. And so that is a huge initiative in my work. And I think that's what unfolded as I began to work with people with anxious attachment, insecure attachment, ambivalent attachment. That's how it unfolded. They just were not able, they could have sex, right? up to a point, and then it was like, I can't give any more of my body away. I just can't do any more. But that's how it unfolds, that being intimate involves being safe.
Yes.
And attachment is being seen, safe, secure, heard, all of those things. So I have plenty on the podcast that we can point you to if in fact you have any of those issues that Gary and I have brought up as far as hindrances to freedom, sexual intimacy. I have had them for sure. And I am so thankful for this book. I have one last difficult question, actually, Gary, if you don't mind. We've laughed a lot, and I'm keeping you, and I want to be able to honor your time.
I'm fine.
Okay. But I have many couples that I work with, and I promised them, I said, oh my gosh, I'm having Gary on, and he's amazing, and his new book. And they're, your book is now a part of my arsenal to help married couples and even premarital. But what would you say? How would you advise theologically, psychologically, all of the things, a couple who say work really well together, they're co-parenting basically, but through the years, and it has involved some attachment issues and some other things, some trauma-informed issues. But even as those heal, when you have gotten out of touch, out of the habit, and perhaps they're sleeping in separate bedrooms now, where would you start? Any practical tips? Does that start with a touch? With any practical tips?
Yeah. A couple things I'd say. Again, we're assuming as you lay the groundwork that trail has been worked through. It's appropriate for the relationship to continue. It's appropriate for them.
That's
to
correct.
Be physically
it's
intimate
safe
again and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the greatest hindrances in the culture today and in the church is that sex equals intercourse. And that might be too much for a couple that's just getting started.
Without a doubt. They can't even be in the same room together at this point because they don't feel safe for perhaps things that have happened up to this point, or even the trauma from their childhood that is now coming to the surface because Christ loves them and he wants them to be free. But then how then do you get to feel safe? Right. Yeah.
So, and we do the same thing with newlywed or premarital couples. Mm-hmm. We explain to them that a lot of times there can be time spent on the honeymoon where you're taking penetrative intercourse off the table and you're getting used to being naked together. You're getting used to touching each other. You're caressing each other. And I said, look, especially to the guy, I don't mean to be sexist here, but just enjoy the journey.
Yes.
Not the end.
Thank you.
The journey, God made the journey very, very pleasurable. So it's not just about getting across the finish line. It's about, wow, look out the window, enjoy the sights.
So take a rest stop.
It's where I would start, whether it's back rubs, whether it's hand holding, whether it's kissing fully clothed, whether it's just being together, whether, it might be wife saying, I can't have you come in me tonight, but I want us to cuddle. I want us to hold each other. I want us to, if the husband knows that ahead of time, he can go in. And so I would just say, do what you can. I'm finishing up a book where a husband just gives an amazing testimony.
Oh, you are reading it? You gave your list by,
writing it.
Oh,
it comes out in October. It's called Making Your Marriage a Fortress, and it deals with couples dealing with difficult issues. But this is
fantastic. I'm sorry.
It's a couple where, and this is a writer, Janelle. The book that you're working on is always the one.
Oh, I know. I know exactly.
So his wife was drawn to him because he could bench press 400 pounds.
Oh, Lord.
Which, if the wives aren't weightlifters, they don't understand, it's probably 200 pounds more than their husbands can weight most of them. That's a lot of weight.
That is a whole lot of weight.
3 years into their marriage, he's diagnosed with MS. He's lived in a wheelchair now for over a decade.
No.
And here's what was so brilliant and so godly. And it's just stories of faith that make you want to cry because of their courage, that what they faced together. And he wheels himself up to the bed every night. And he can get himself in the bed, but he can't lift his legs up. his wife, Stacy, has to come and lift his legs up. He says, but I don't let her put me in the bed because I can do that. And he says, he goes, physically, let's say I can only do 20% of what I used to be able to do. He goes, but I'm going to do 100% of that 20%.
Yes, that's beautiful.
I'm going to do 100% of what I'm able to do, and I would say that people that are restarting their sex lives,
I like that.
Just because you say, we can't have full intercourse. So, okay, do 100% of what you're able to do. I talk to husbands that have prostate removed and then have sexual issues, or wives that have certain issues that come up. I said, okay, do what you can. Thank God. Be generous and kind with each other. Don't ever. It would be so cruel if Stacy made Daryl feel broke. It's the reverse. He gets to tell her thank you. She gets joy out of her thank you. And I would say the same thing then with the sexual issues, that do 100% of that 20%.
I love
and don't worry about the 80% that you can't do. And it will solve a lot of fights in this area too, Janelle, because sometimes the husband will want the wife to do something, or the wife will want the husband to do something. And my response is, there are, like, especially if you read this book, there are 1,000 things you can do in bed. Are you going to really obsess over one thing? Thank
you, Gary. Now we're getting into it. So I think we just need to keep going. Now we're getting real.
Yeah, don't paint your bedroom with disappointment.
Oh gosh.
Because of one thing that is often picked up from unhealthy places anyway. So
Powerful.
Just that
Restarting Your Sex Life is your next book.
Yeah, well, we might. Deborah and I have thought together, seeing how this book does and how it's received. I think there's a great book to be written for premarital couples.
Oh yes,
for empty nesters later in life.
Oh yes, aging. Yep. Yeah. Restarting Your Sex Life is a huge. I'm at least. Can I at least borrow that to blog on, or to use in a workshop, because that is exactly where I sit in my practice with many couples.
Yes. Yeah,
and that's the truth. Great. And they're sitting in the pews of our churches. So, Gary, wow. Just the tip of the iceberg, but it was so fabulous. So thank you,
Janelle,
so much, you guys.
So looking forward to talking with you. And like writing with Deborah, this exceeded my expectations. I can tell that we're a brother and sister in Christ. That's what I just kept telling Deborah, that it's a special thing when you're trying to build the kingdom together, when you have the same concern and passion, and God brings out the strengths of each to bring it together. And I just think it's a beautiful thing to be a part of the church, encouraging each other, not competing, but lifting each other up. And
we can't do that anymore.
Inside of each other to push the church forward toward Christ.
Because it's a multifaceted issue in many respects. And this is an issue. Sex, intimacy is an issue that is so heavy on the hearts of couples who are struggling. And so you are giving voice to something so necessary. And I just wish you Godspeed in it.
Thank you so much.
Wish you so much. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening today. It was great having you here. For even more great content and resources, please join the Stronger Everyday online community at JanelleReardon.com. Always remember, you, my friend, have value, worth, and dignity.